Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm Officer Christopher Wilburn, and on behalf of Mayor Greg Ballard, Deputy Mayor Olgin Williams, Public Safety Director Troy Riggs, Chief Richard Hite, and the IMPD command staff, I want to welcome you to the IMPD Honor Awards. At this time, please stand for the presentation of colors by the IMPD Chief's Honor Guard, followed by the singing of our national anthem by the technicians from Arsenal Tech High School and the invocation by Chaplain David Cody of the IMPD. Thank you. That was a beautiful rendition of our national anthem. Let's give them a round of applause. Beautiful. Beautiful job. You may be seated. Chaplain Cody for the invocation.
Let us pray. Father, we thank you today for your goodness and for your mercy. Thank you, God, for this time that has been set aside for us to celebrate and give honor. For your word declares to give honor to whom honor is due, and that we should rejoice with those who rejoice. God, today we thank you for the men and women who have assembled here today. We pray, God, that you would give strength, give power, give direction, and give understanding. Bless this time together. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you for being here as we honor the selfless acts of our officers, our hardworking civilian employees, and some great community members and partners. The selection process is not easy, and it's very time-consuming. Many are nominated, but few are chosen. But before we begin, I'd like to invite to speak Deputy Mayor Olgin. Should you have some words?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Officer Wilburn. Truly, we give honor to the Lord Jesus Christ first and foremost for being able to be here. And I thank the Lord for allowing me to be in this cold weather. I feel it. My hands are cold, my feet are cold. That means I'm alive when I feel it, so I don't complain about it too much at my age. And I appreciate, amen, Safety Director Riggs, Chief Hite, command staff, everyone is here, and the honorees today. On behalf of Mayor Greg Ballard and the City of Indianapolis, we appreciate the hard work that our public safety officials are doing for the city. I've been working with police and fire personnel for a long time. They help raise my children in Hallville, USA. And I can't say enough about the challenges you have, but the great work you do. I feel safe in Indianapolis. That's why I've been staying here all my life, and my family's been raised here, because we feel like we have some of the finest public safety officers in the country, and do a great job for us, no matter what people may say. And I appreciate you every day going out and putting your life on the line, amen, making sure that we're safe. I know Mayor Ballard appreciates you, the city, the Williams family appreciate you. Let me tell you, you're second to none. I mean, you do it right. You do it great. Not only do you do your job from the training point, but you care about people. You do the extra mile stuff, the clothe the child. You do the other things that people don't read about in the paper. You take time to talk to the citizens. And you do give out traffic tickets every once in a while, but that's all right. That's part of it, you know. I don't have any now. I'm good. But we thank you for being here in part of this city, for staying with us, supporting us, and keeping us safe. I know you, and we're praying for you. I mean, constantly, because my Bible that I read tell me to pray for you, and that you are part of God's leadership in the country, in the world, and keep the good work up. And I appreciate your families also. I know sometimes family members have it hard when you leave different shifts and going out, and they are fearful for you, but we appreciate your wife, your children, for supporting you and allowing you to serve us. So God bless you, and thank you for all the great work you've been doing. We're happy to be here to honor you all today.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Now, before Public Safety Director Troy Riggs speaks, as well as IMPD Chief of Police Richard Hite, let's talk a little bit about how the nomination process works. A nomination is made by someone, sworn or civilian, regardless of rank. Those nominations are then submitted to the Media Relations Office and organized for review. The Honor Awards Committee, comprised of police officers from throughout the department, will meet to review each nomination. After a deliberating process, they will decide which award or if an award should be given. Let's talk about the awards committee members. Officer Malcolm Smith from downtown, Officer Tracy Connect from our North District, Officer Eli Racevich from our Northwest District, Lieutenant Susan Hill from Southwest, Officer Megan Mullahan from Southeast, Sergeant Brian Dixon from East District, Officer Jeremy Stewart from our Training Division, Officer Brian Rumke from Administration Division, Sergeant Ronald Huber from our Homeland Security Division, and Sergeant Columbus Ricks from our homicide investigations. Thank you for volunteering to participate in this important responsibility and for the time you spent in selecting our recipients this afternoon. Now I'd like to introduce our Public Safety Director, Troy Riggs.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Before I begin, I'd like to thank all of our federal, state, and local partners that are here today, some will be receiving awards, others are just here in support. Also, it would be impossible for the police department to do its job without the support of our prosecutors. I do want to thank our U.S. Attorney Joe Hogsett, who's here today. Thank you, Mr. Hogsett, for your hard work and help. Also, Mr. Curry and his office is represented today by being here. Mr. Curry could not be here. He's a little under the weather, but wanted to send his regrets as well. You know, I've been here a year now. I've learned a new term, polar vortex. I'm not sure what that's about. I think we have round 2 coming Monday through Wednesday of next week. And just to let you know, I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, moved to Texas for 3 years. I got a phone call before I arrived from Corpus Christi, Texas. They have closed schools tomorrow because the temperature may get to 32 degrees overnight. So what a difference a few thousand miles makes. But thank you for being here. Let me just say, as we celebrate individual accomplishments, I think it's also important for us to realize that it's because of these individual accomplishments that the police department does so well. It's also because every day men and women come to this work, whether they're sworn or civilian, and they do the job and they do it well every day. And it's been a good year for IMPD. Yes, we've had issues with some homicides being up, but if you look at our crime numbers, all of them are down, including shootings are down this year. You continue to work hard, do work, and earn the respect of the public each and every day. And as a result of that, we're starting to see some successes. We're starting to get inquiries nationally. The President of the United States asked our mayor to come to Washington, D.C. and share the work that you're doing. I think that's something we should be proud of. And because of that, the citizens are listening. And we've worked very hard internally to listen to what you've said as an organization, change things that need to be changed. I can't give enough credit to Chief Hite and his staff. Because of their hard work, because of their evaluation of budgets, we're able to hire 50 officers this year and 45 civilians and take care of pay increases and get contractual negotiations out of the way that gives some longevity and certainty of pay increases in the future. Those are wins. None of that could have happened if the police department wasn't going out doing the right thing each and every day. In addition to that, the mayor proposed and the council put forward an additional 30 officers this year for a total of 80. Why did they do that? Because I have been told time and time again they like what this department is doing, the leadership the chief and his staff are doing, and what you do each and every day. You're the reason we're successful. You're the reason this city's moving in the right direction. I can't thank you enough for that. And as I always end, and I sincerely mean this, is my prayer is always for the safety of the citizens of this community and also for your safety and your family's safety as well. God bless you and thank you.
Thank you, Director Riggs. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to welcome the Chief of Police of IMPD, Richard Hite.
Thank you, Chris. Wasn't that a wonderful rendition? These young people for Arsenal Tech, we want to thank them again, and we'll call them the Chris Wilburn Singers, because normally Chris delivers that wonderful rendition. Thank you for being here, ladies and gentlemen. We're blessed to have the Deputy Mayor and the Director here, and our excellent command staff, but more importantly, you're here. And I want to start with you because I think it's important that the fact you braved the elements, 0 temperatures to be here to honor our heroes and sheroes is important. As I was leaving the city county building, I was stopped by a young lady who said, Chief, can you do me a favor? Can you lock up Joe Chili and Jack Frost and make sure it's a little warmer the next few days? But I've also ran into a person who reminded me how important it is to give back. A man was on the corner giving us a history of our city. And he walked us around and talked about what was here once upon a time and what was there and how he was kind of like the ambassador that brings information to visitors who come to visit. He calls himself Houseless Joe. He said, I'm not homeless because I choose to be houseless. So as Houseless Joe was giving us information about what he saw in terms of his life, he gave a personal account of what it was he went through. But he always talked about giving back. Even though Houseless Joe went through hard times, he talked about how it was important to give back. But he asked me a question after all this wonderful information he shared. He talked about the importance of the greatest nation in the world. He asked what was the greatest nation in the world. He said, I said, of course, the United States. He said, no. He said, the greatest nation in the world, young man, is a donation. So Houseless Joe was looking for a donation for the information he gave back. Well, the donation we have here today of the people here in this room is tremendous. We're going to take time to honor a few of those, but we can't be remiss if we can't talk about partnerships and relationships, part of that donation of time and effort. Yes, I'm glad to have the U.S. Attorney here and members of the Prosecutor's Office. Glad to see our partners in public safety with Chief Malone and Chief Kuntz, but we also have the families that support our heroes. And each one of you make a difference. We appreciate the donation of time, allowing you to, the sacrifice you give. You donate your loved one to us for 8 hours a day and sometimes longer. And they donate their time to give back to community, like Houseless Joe. They're sharing themselves in information, but more importantly, they put themselves in harm's way. As I watched the flag walk in today, I'm reminded of the colors of the flag and how wonderful it is to be in a great nation. We can talk about what it is we're about as people, a good city, a good country. But you look at the red, you're reminded of the fact, the red talks about the blood that's shed. We had one of our fine officers, Officer Bradway, Rod Bradway, and his wife Jamie is here. We want to talk about the fact of the white, the honor that's in the flag. It's important of the honor of law enforcement, the honor of this great city and great law enforcement agency. But the blue is about you, the bravery, the going beyond the veil, sharing of yourself, putting yourself in harm's way. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what this police department does every day. I'm proud to be an opportunity to share as their leader, but I'm really proud of the fact that they go beyond. beyond, as the director said, beyond the hiccups we have, the technological advances of a lot of places, we're finding that we have a lot of that here. We can do better with it. We're finding that there's opportunity for us to share with you our successes, but also thank you for accepting our failures. We're trying hard, and we're going to continue to do better. But we also need you to continue to pray for us as this good department moves forward. So the day is your day. You're going to receive your awards, you're going to receive your ribbons, but it's only a small token of our thanks for the hard work and going beyond the pale. God bless you, and God thank you.
Thank you, Chief Hite. No truer words were ever spoken. And in the spirit of bravery, it is my honor to welcome our guest speakers here this afternoon, Julian Grace from Wish TV and Fanchon Stinger from Fox 59. Please join in the welcoming here this afternoon.
Well, thank you for that very warm welcome. And good afternoon to all of you. Okay, much better. To our distinguished leadership, Chief Hite, to the mayor's office, to the officers who are seated here today, to your families. Today is about saying thank you. Thank you from all of us in the media. Thank you from all of us in the community. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So many of you serve the most vulnerable in our community. In many situations, you are serving in the most challenging of situations. But it is your leadership, it is your servanthood, it is the courage and dedication that you exemplify every single day that you take to the streets that we honor and that we are so grateful for. We want you to know that as a community, our prayers are with you each and every day, because we know it is the covering of our Lord Jesus that gives you the wisdom, that gives you the courage, and gives you the opportunity to go out and serve in the capacity that you do. And for you guys that serve, and you women that serve each and every day, of course it's just a job to you. But to us, it is a representation of the utmost beautiful display of the human spirit, of courage, of dedication, and of your willingness to sacrifice yourselves and to also sacrifice your families, because it is your families that worry about you the most, we know, when you step out of the door. So for giving of yourself, it is our absolute honor and my absolute pleasure to be able to be a part of honoring all of you today. I want to turn it over to Julian for a few words as well.
Well, Fanchon, I am so excited to be here. I can't believe y'all let me in the back door. I mean, seriously. Did y'all check my credentials before I came in here? I've been working at Wish TV for 3.5 years. I am a Fountain Square kid, born and raised on the southeast side of Indianapolis. My alma mater was just here, Arsenal Tech High School. So it brings me great honor to be here today. You know, one of my favorite quotes is from a pastor out of Denver, Colorado, and he simply says this. He says, "Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is not the absence of fear. What courage is doing what you're called to do in spite of your fears, in spite of how you feel this very moment when you receive that phone call or even when you walk out of these doors." I heard another really good quote one day, and it was a man, and he was basically talking about how the bravest of men and women, they have known fear. I mean, paralyzing, nail-biting, call your mama type of fear. And he says the difference between them and others is that they didn't yield to those fears. And the men and women we will talk about today, they didn't yield to their fears. Instead, they pressed the gas and they say, "We are here to protect and serve." And for that, we tell you thank you. We tell you thank you for answering the call in the middle of the night. We tell you thank you for coming out to see about us, regardless of what zip code we live in. And we tell you thank you for always being there. And we mean that from the bottom of our hearts. The last thing I will leave you with before we get started is one of my favorite scriptures is in John chapter 15, verse 13, and it simply says this: "What greater love is there to lay down one's life for a friend? But each and every day, you guys do it for total strangers." And that is awesome. So thank you for allowing me to be here today. Fanchon.
Yeah. And as we move forward into the honor portion of our ceremony today, we're going to start with the certificates of appreciation. Those certificates of appreciation are awarded to citizens who render valuable or courageous assistance to our IMPD department or its officers. Our first certificate of appreciation goes to two people, Allison Hampton and Shannon Smith. It would be an understatement to say that one of the most stressful positions in law enforcement is that of the emergency control dispatchers. Despite the confusion surrounding a shooting on April 2nd, 2013, control operators Allison Hampton and Shannon Smith work as a team to manage the hectic radio traffic. Operator Hampton became the sole spokesperson for the Indianapolis-Marion County Communication Agency, while Operator Smith took on the task of recording the incident details. Although Operator Hampton was dealing with the challenge of simultaneously creating two separate incident histories, she maintained very calm stature with her transmission, and the same demeanor was transferable to many of the officers on the scene of this accident. Operator Smith gave her attention to the critical task of entering real-time activities into the history log for the officers working that incident. Throughout the hectic situation, she was able to maintain an accurate and timely record of the incident that would prove to serve as a valuable aid to investigators and administrative officers who would be reviewing that incident. At times, we may take our control operators for granted. However, operators Allison Hampton and Shannon Smith serve as perfect reminders for us of the time that it takes, that we need to take, to thank them for what they do each and every day. Today, it is our absolute pleasure to say thank you and present them with a certificate of appreciation. Thank you so much.
Certificate of Appreciation, Autumn Lungford. On May 21st, 2013, at 3 o'clock in the morning, Miss Autumn Lungford saw a naked kid, around 6, climbing up the wall on a nearby interstate. If the child made it over the wall, she knew that a painful tragedy was the only ending. Acting quickly, she and 2 of her friends were able to get to the child before he made it over the wall. After saving the child, Miss Lungford then drove to a gas station and called police. On their arrival, officers were able to determine that the child was autistic and unable to speak. With the help of an ID bracelet that the child was wearing, the officers were able to determine that the little boy's identity along with his home address. On arrival of his home, officers found the front door standing open. The child's grateful parents were not aware that the child had gotten out of the house and was wandering in the streets. It is because of Ms. Lungford's actions that this story has a happy ending, and it is our pleasure to present Ms. Autumn Lungford with a certificate of appreciation.
Our next certificate of appreciation goes to Indiana State Trooper Kyle Freeman. During 2012 and 2013, Trooper Freeman and his service dog, Smoke, were instrumental in assisting the IMPD Southeast District Late TAC NRO unit in locating notable amounts of evidence during the execution of search warrants and traffic stops. Some of Trooper Freeman's and Smoke's finds include 30 pounds of marijuana with an approximate street value of $30,000, 150 grams of cocaine, approximate street value of $7,500, controlled substance prescription drugs over $10,000 in currency, and more than 5 illegal firearms and 3 vehicles, which were all held for forfeiture. For his commendable service and vital assistance to a sister law enforcement agency, we are so happy and honored to present Indiana State Trooper Kyle Freeman with a certificate of appreciation. Thank you.
Certificate of Condemnation, awarded to IMPD officers who display efforts beyond their normal police duties or job requirements. Officer James Albin. During January of 2013, Officer James Albin, after becoming the president of the Marion County Task Force in 2012, coordinated efforts to bring the training program of electrical aspects of fire investigations to Indianapolis. As the sponsors for this special training session, the International Association of Arson Investigators made it possible for 3 IMPD detectives to attend the training for free. This training not only benefited the detectives throughout the electrical curriculum, but also facilitated professional contacts with various other investigators in the public and private sectors. Officers traveled from as far away as Puerto Rico for this training program. Officer James Albin's efforts as president of this task force has greatly contributed to the IMPD and emulates that he is intimately involved in leading IMPD and finding new ways to continue education in arson investigations. Today, we are happy to present Officer James Albin with a certificate of commendation.
Our next certificate of commendation goes to Officer Mark Barnett. Since joining IMPD Downtown District in 2012, Officer Mark Barnett has excelled in completing complicated investigations, maintaining a positive attitude, and facilitating a good relationship with his fellow officers. Officer Barnett's diligence, dedication, and tenaciousness, specifically during January of 2013, were the driving forces which assisted him in apprehending a suspect who had abused his own child. These same attributes also gave Officer Barnett the ability to locate and apprehend a suspect wanted for an assault. After locating that suspect and while attempting to detain him, the suspect suddenly punched Officer Barnett, which ultimately left him with 5 stitches above his eyebrow. Still, though, Officer Barnett continued to pursue that assailant, even after being injured. Officer Barnett's commitment to duty, his determination to law enforcement to help make Indianapolis a safest community is what we honor today. And it is our honor to present Officer Mark Barnett with another certificate of commendation. Thank you so much.
Our next recipient is Sergeant Brandon Laser. On April 27, 2013, Sergeant Brandon Laser was off duty in his personal vehicle traveling on Interstate 70 when he witnessed 2 men loading batteries from a road work sign into the back of a vehicle. He waited for the vehicle to pass, then began to follow the suspects. In an attempt to evade Sergeant Laser, the driver drove through a red light. After traveling a short distance further, the vehicle suddenly stopped. At this time, Sergeant Laser was able to detain the 2 suspected thieves until the Indiana State Police and Plainfield officers arrived to assist. His acute observation skills resulted in the apprehension of 2 different individuals and multiple charges for each. And we are pleased to present Sergeant Brandon Laser with a certificate of commendation.
Our next honor goes to Officer William Wogan. On September 14, 2013, Officer Wogan was the first to respond to a run involving a child. That child had been shot in the arm. Although he did not have the information regarding the shooter, Officer Wogan, with no concern for his own safety, quickly located that child, retrieved his trauma kit, and started applying first aid until the medics got there. When the medics did get on the scene, they commented on the effective bleeding control and wound dressing that was done by Officer Wogan. Officer Wogan's quick thinking, his actions, may have very well saved that little child's life. The little child was critically injured. Officer Wogan's quick thinking and selfless disregard make it our honor to present him with the certificate of commendation. Thank you so much. The next group of officers will also receive a certificate of commendation. They are Officer Nicholas Robalewski, Officer Carol Carson, Officer Scott Godby, Officer Eric Huxley, and Officer Brian Ramey. On July 30th, 2013, a woman called 911, and we all remember this story. She had been in an accident. She told dispatchers she was unable to get out of her car. Her car was flipped in a ditch and filling with water. In this situation, of course, every second counts. That woman was unfamiliar with the area. She was disoriented. She was unable to give her location. When the aid of the MapStar system helped, dispatch immediately sent officers to 3969 North Glen Arm Road. With keen knowledge of that patrol area, the officers knew that the address given by dispatch could not be accurate. Officer Huxley knew of the drainage ditch at I-465 northbound and West 38th Street where a previous accident had happened, and he advised the other units to check that area. Good thing he did. Officers located her vehicle in that exact location. As the victim strained to keep her head above water, the officers knew that they had to work quickly to prevent this from ending in death. With brute force, sheer heroism, and with that car continuing to fill with water, the officers you're looking at right now were able to open the driver's side door just enough to get her out and save her life. For your combined efforts of knowing your surface area, for taking immediate action, for working together as a team to bring this incident to a happy ending, it is our honor to present all of you with this certificate of commendation. Thank you.
Our next certificate of commendation, Detective Sean Looper, Detective Scott Wentz, Detective Robert Chappell, Sergeant Brandon Mills, Officer Peter Fex, Officer Daniel Huber, Officer Sidney McDaniel, Officer Matthew Plummer. On May 19, 2013, Officer Douglas Morning received a radio run involving a 6-year-old victim who, while playing outside, was forcibly abducted and assaulted. Officer Morning immediately began gathering pertinent preliminary information from the young victim. Officer Peter Fex, Daniel Huber, Sidney McDaniel, Matthew Plummer, and Sergeant Brandon Mills responded to the area and immediately began a door-to-door canvass of the apartment complex. As a member of the Child Abuse Unit, Officer Looper is aware of the need to quickly identify and apprehend a suspect, so he contacted Officer Wentz and Chappell, who, despite being off duty, immediately went to the scene to assist. During the canvass, Officer Fex and McDaniel, with the assistance of a cooperating individual, identified the suspect. In less than 30 hours after the initial call for help, the officers were able to identify, arrest, and secure a confession from the suspect of this violent crime. Incidents involving the abduction and assault of a child by a stranger are fortunately very rare, and nothing frightens the community more than having its most vulnerable citizens targeted by a predator. Officer Sean Looper, Scott Wentz, Robert Chappell, Peter Fex, Matthew, Daniel Huber, Matthew Plummer, and Sergeant Brandon Mills are guardian angels for the littlest of our citizens, and your commitment and professionalism help to make our community better and safer. We are proud to present you each with this certificate of commendation.
Our next commendation goes to Officer Henry Gregory. On July 21st, 2013, while he was off duty and near the Walgreens located at 9240 Rockville Road, Officer Henry Gregory noticed a person who seemed pretty suspicious, pedaling a bicycle very fast. Well, unaware that the Walgreens had just been robbed, Officer Gregory followed that person who had started to shed layers of clothing. Not suspicious at all, right? Well, Officer Gregory got out of his personally owned vehicle, identified himself as a police officer, and started to chase the suspect. After a brief struggle, Officer Gregory gained control of that suspect and then called for assistance. Officer Henry Gregory's dedication to justice and allegiance to law enforcement, even when he is off duty, makes him worthy of this honor, and it is our honor to present him with this certificate of commendation. Thank you.
Certificate of commendation, Officer Christopher Shaw. In August 2013, several stores on East District in a span of a few months were experiencing a high number of thefts in which the suspect's vehicle and suspect description were the same in all of the incidents. Then on August 14, 2013, Officer Shaw observed an individual commit an infraction. But due to the high rate of narcotics complaints and criminal activity in the area, he stopped this individual. From this stop, he was able to determine that the individual had an outstanding warrant in another county. During general conversations, the arrestee gave Officer Shaw extremely detailed information about criminal activity in the area, including information on the subject wanted for a series of store thefts. Officer Shaw knew to be valid, some of the information had to be checked out. Seizing this opportunity to build the case on several dangerous individuals and curb criminal activity on the district, Officer Shaw started contacting detectives. Officer Shaw rabbited down the rabbit hole as far as it would go. During his duration of time on the department, Officer Shaw has proven himself a prudent and motivated officer who is excited and willing to thoroughly fight crime. Officer Shaw's exceptional work in finding, arresting, and assisting in the clearance of several past criminal cases, along with gaining information on criminal activity occurring throughout the area, has already made a difference and will continue to make a difference. For his steadfast dedication to duty and continued commitment, and he continues to help make a difference for the quality of life of the citizens on his service district, it is our pleasure to honor Officer Christopher Shaw with a certificate of commendation.
Our next group of officers, Officer Jeffrey Stagg, Officer Kevin Brown, and Officer Shane Decker. On July 15, 2013, Officers Stagg, Brown, and Decker responded to a run regarding a report of a suicidal person. The caller was the sister of a suicidal man whose brother was in bed, with a sheet over his head and a knife to his throat. The officers found the man sitting on a chair, though, at the back porch, gripping a sharp 8-inch kitchen knife by the handle and pointing the blade at his throat. The man told Officer Skaggs that he had no reason to live and he didn't want to talk anymore. On Officer Stagg's signal, Officer Brown quickly deployed his taser. The man, still holding the knife with both hands, was trying to raise the knife to his head to stab himself in the head. Officer Decker grabbed one of the man's arms. Officer Stagg grabbed the other arm. The officers then placed that man into custody for immediate detention. Officer Jeffrey Stagg, Kevin Brown, and Shane Decker faced the potentially dangerous situation with an individual bent on killing himself. It was their quick action without concern for their own safety that likely saved that man's life. We are happy to present them with this certificate of commendation today.
Our next officers, Officer Daniel Brezick and Officer Jeremy Morris. On February 25, 2013, Officer Brezick and Morris responded to a person with a gun call. The dispatcher stated that a male suspect wearing a black hoodie, black pants, and multicolored beads in his hair had a firearm and was holding the occupants of the residence at gunpoint. On their arrival, a woman opened the door and backed away with a scared look on her face. Officer Brezick could see a man fitting the description, the suspect's description that is, standing further back inside the apartment. Seeing the officer, the suspect ran into an area where several more women were screaming and crying. Officer Brezick ordered the man to stop. Fearing for the safety of others, he ran after the suspect and saw him reaching for his waistband. Officer Morris was now on the scene, and the suspect was now in the bedroom, crouching behind a mattress. Fearful of an ambush, the officer stopped at the door of the bedroom, and while giving the suspect verbal commands, a metal object hit the floor next to the subject. Unsure if he had discarded a weapon, reloaded a weapon, or was adding weapons, Officer Brezick and Morris made the decision to move in on the suspect, and after a short struggle, the suspect was in custody. Officer Brezick would later recover a loaded firearm with a round in the chamber. The suspect would later tell investigators that he was using the firearm to hold the women at gunpoint and that he planned to use the firearm when confronted by officers. For their quick actions that prevented a violent encounter from ending tragically and getting another bad person off the streets, we are proud to present Officer Daniel Brezick and Officer Jeremy Morris with a certificate of commendation.
And Officer Brezick, you can stay right there. We're joining Officer Brezick in receiving this next commendation is Officer John Schweers and Officer John Walters. While doing a traffic stop on March 21st, 2013, Officer Schweers, Brezick, and Walters encountered an extremely combative individual. He was determined to escape their custody at all costs. After stopping the car and requesting the vehicle's registration, that driver was not happy, and he said it was inside the truck. Officers ordered the two men out of the truck but did not find the registration. As Officer Brezick was approaching the passenger to search him, the man, in an attempt to rid himself of illegal narcotics, started emptying his pockets. It was at that time that he hit Officer Brezick in the face and ripped his shoulder microphone from his uniform. As Officer Brezick was trying to get the suspect under control, he started pulling out of his jacket and hit him several more times. The suspect discarded another bag of powdered cocaine as he tried to run off. After catching up with the suspect, Officer Brezick deployed his taser. However, The taser didn't even take him down. Officer Walters also deployed his taser and sprayed his CSOC, and this too had very little effect on the man. Officer Schwiers tackled the suspect to the ground, and he continued to violently resist. The driver of the vehicle, watching the officers struggle with his partner in crime, took his opportunity to try and run. Officer Walters apprehended him before he could get away. Each of these officers, though, stayed in the fight. They did not give up until this violent and dangerous suspect finally said, "I'm done." For each of their acts of bravery and their unwavering commitment to serve and protect our community in the face of such violence, it is our pleasure to present Officers Schwiers, Brezik, and Walters with this certificate of commendation. Lieutenant Tammy Kaiser, Sergeant Jeff Wager, Detective James Albin, Detective Aaron Carter, Detective Alan Elgert, Detective Scott Kinsey, Detective Mike Mitchell, Detective Douglas Pearson, Detective Andy Rollinson, and a certificate of appreciation going to IFD investigator Mario Garza. This Medal of Merit goes to this group of people for handling a situation we have all come to know pretty intimately. On Saturday, November 10th, 2012, an explosion which blasted with a volatile energy of 6,000 pounds of dynamite happened in a quiet neighborhood of Richmond Hills. Ultimately, 2 innocent people were killed. Hundreds of other people, their lives were changed forever. 33 homes were damaged so badly they had to be demolished. Lead Detective Sergeant Jeff Wagner and Detective Scott Kinsey, as well as Lieutenant Tammy Kaiser, Detectives Jim Albin, Aaron Carter, Doug Pearson, Alan Englert, and Andy Rollinson, Homicide Detective Mike Mitchell, and IFD investigator Mario Garza wasted no time in starting their investigation. Once determining the explosion was an intentional act, these detectives worked tirelessly and devotedly through the Thanksgiving holiday to ensure that swift justice was brought. Ultimately, that justice was brought 41 days after the explosion. In all, nearly 100 interviews were conducted, 24 search warrants were served, and 3 people, as you know, are currently under arrest. These 3 people are charged with over 50 criminal counts, including felony murder and arson. The scope of this investigation was immense, and controlling it was an enormous task. Through a collaborative partnership between IMPD, AFT, NTSB, Crime Lab, and IFD arson investigators, they collected and organized 5 large plastic totes, a banker box, over 100 individual items of evidence, and over 1,500 photos of evidentiary purposes. While under the national media spotlight, those detectives also investigated 25 other arson incidents that happened throughout the Indianapolis jurisdiction. To this group, we humbly say thank you for bringing justice to such a tragic event in our community. And with our pleasure, we present you with this Medal of Merit. IFD arson investigator Mario Garza is with pride and gratitude that we present you with this certificate of appreciation for your commitment to this great city and this assignment. Thank you all.
Our next Medal of Merit goes to Officer Stephen Spears. In late 2012, Officer Spears was working on East District, developing information on specific crimes and criminals, and acting as a liaison between street officers and investigative officers. During this time, he also created a network of out-of-county investigators for sharing information regarding crimes on the East District and the surrounding areas. It was during this time that Officer Spears became aware of and had several interviews with the suspect in several burglaries and fencing operations. After gaining the suspect's confidence, Officer Spears was able to obtain information on several other crimes. Verifying the information, he began building a case on a large heroin ring. Although he had no experience in working undercover narcotics cases, but with some help and assistance from other detectives, he was willing to learn and move forward with this investigation. The investigation grew into a multi-state investigation. Working closely with others outside agencies and prosecutors, the investigation lasted almost 5 months. And Officer Spears spent many hours writing search warrants, arranging numerous undercover transactions, and several high-risk warrants. Finally, in March of 2013, his investigation work resulted in a sufficient number of individuals being charged with over 40 felonies. The recovery of a number of firearms were recovered, and at least 2 of the suspects being charged with serious violent felon were in possession and seized of over 100 grams of heroin worth more than $30,000. The success of this investigation would be significant for any investigator, but given Officer Spears' limited experience, this is a remarkable accomplishment. He grew a major long-term investigation from a simple jailhouse interview and saw it through to a successful completion. In addition to his work on this case, Officer Spears was able to gain trust of a suspect from another county known as a prolific burglar and gain a confession to a number of armed robberies in Indianapolis, including 6 bank robberies and a bank robbery in another county. Officer Stephen Spears, for your outstanding work and commitment to getting these criminals off our streets, we are proud to honor you with the Medal of Merit.
Our next Medal of Merit goes to Sergeant William Carter. Because he knew that Sergeant Carter's knowledge ranged from technical to analytical, before retiring, Sergeant Mark Albert asked for his assistance with a cold case from 1989 that involved a sexual assault, a beating, and the murder of a young woman. Getting right to work on the case, Sergeant Carter again took the statements from individuals originally related to the case, including a family friend. However, this family friend became uncooperative, and Sergeant Carter decided to run his palm print for an unrelated case against a crime scene palm print obtained during the initial investigation. Guess what? It was a match. When officers went to arrest the suspect, a short standoff developed before the suspect decided to surrender. The suspect later pleaded guilty and is now serving a 65-year sentence, and the victim's family, thankfully, has closure. In his current assignment as IMPD Nuisance Abatement Supervisor, Sergeant Carter helps to keep track of over 1,800 businesses that have a license to serve alcohol in Marion County, along with obtaining temporary closure orders for locations that are a proven nuisance to our community and or show the potential for violence or harm, including those with fire violations. During 2012, he was successful in closing a number of businesses that were the center of violence and other criminal acts. This year, he has been successful in closing more nuisance locations, including one where 82 minors were arrested and at a 13-year-old girl's birthday party. In a first-of-its-kind sweep of 15 licensed bars, he worked alongside code enforcement, health and hospital, and state excise, and their sweep resulted in more than 180 violation notices and the closing of 4 of the locations. In addition to all of this, after responding to the drowning death in 2005 of a 7-year-old autistic child who wandered away from home and ended up in a retention pond, Sergeant Carter purchased a bloodhound, and he got the necessary certifications. He now assists in searching for missing persons on his own time without any compensation. Sergeant William Carter, for your commitment to duty and your devotion to doing what it takes, whatever it takes, to help make a lasting change in our community, we honor you with this Medal of Merit. Thank you.
Medal of Merit, Officer John Montgomery, and Certificate of Commendation, Officer Josh Taylor and Officer Corey Schnick. As Officer Montgomery was on his way to Southwest Middle Shift Roll Call, a run came in regarding an armed gunman committing a bank robbery inside a store on Kentucky Avenue. He immediately drove towards the area to look for the suspect's vehicle. Shortly after arriving in the area, he saw a vehicle and a suspect matching the broadcast description. The suspect began to flee, and Officer Montgomery pursued the vehicle. Officers Taylor and Officer Schnick soon joined him in the pursuit of the armed suspect. Because of the location and their concern for other drivers, the suspect and officers, Officer Taylor flawlessly executed a PIT, that's called a Precision Intervention Technique maneuver, successfully ending the pursuit without injury to anyone. To prevent the suspect from possibly escaping, Officer Schnick quickly positioned his patrol car front bumper to bumper with the suspect's car, putting him face to face with the suspected armed robber. The suspect was taken into custody, and officers found the gun used in the robbery on the suspect and the money taken in the bank robbery. For their teamwork to keep others safe as they quickly chased down the suspect and apprehended an armed robber, we are happy to present Officer John Montgomery with the Medal of Merit and Officers Josh Taylor and Corey Schnick with a Certificate of Commendation.
We now move to our Medals of Bravery. The Medals of Bravery are awarded to an IMPD officer for risking his or her life in the saving or attempted saving of another human life. The first Medal of Bravery goes to Officer Joel Keller, Ranger Brent Kintner, and Officer Ryan Irwin. On February 1st, 2013, Officers Joel Keller and Ryan Irwin and Ranger Brent Kintner observed a vehicle crash on West 38th Street. When that crash happened, the car immediately burst into flames. Each of these officers quickly approached the vehicle and found the driver was unresponsive. Grabbing his fire extinguisher, Ranger Kintner went to work to try and put the fire out. At the same time, Officers Irwin and Keller took on the task of trying to rescue that driver from the car before the car completely was consumed in fire. After several attempts, they were finally able to get that driver out just before the flames fully consumed the vehicle. Each of these officers knew that time was not a luxury if they were going to save this man's life. Without any hesitation, they put their own lives in jeopardy to save another. For their efforts and their actions that made the difference, we do graciously honor Officer Joel Keller, Ranger Brent Kintner, and Officer Ryan Irwin with this Medal of Bravery. Thank you.
Medal of Bravery, Sergeant Dale Marshall, Officer Aaron Stanley, and Officer Christopher Frazier. On March 30th, 2013, a radio dispatch came out regarding a vehicle accident with a fire on the 6100 block of West 71st. Sergeant Dale, who was off duty, was just down the street and saw the accident. Responding to the scene, he advised control that he needed someone with a fire extinguisher and that the driver was entrapped and there was a fire. Officer Stanley arrived, and he and Sergeant Marshall took turns attempting to free the driver from the burning vehicle. On his arrival, the flames and smoke were so thick that Officer Frazier could only see the lower half of Officer Stanley as he was leaning into the driver's side window. Fearing for the life of Officer Stanley, Officer Frazier rushed over and grabbed Officer Stanley by his gun belt and started pulling. Officer Stanley maintained his grasp on the driver, who was on fire, and together the officers were able to get the victim partially out of the driver's window. Again, the flames and smoke forced the officers to step back from the vehicle to avoid serious injury and to catch their breath. The officers went back into the flames 2 or 3 more times until they finally freed the victim, who was literally on fire. From the fiery vehicle, as they released him from the fiery vehicle, it began to explode from heat. The officers rolled the victim in an attempt to extinguish the flames. When this was unsuccessful, Officer Stanley ripped off his uniform shirt and used it to try to smother the flames of the victim. Citizens who had stopped to assist provided coats to help put the fire out. Officer Stanley was transported to Wishart Hospital via ambulance, where he was treated for smoke inhalation and second-degree burns to his face and hands. The victim suffered multiple and serious injuries, but he was alive. At great risk and complete disregard for their own personal safety, the officers entered the flames numerous times to free the victim from certain death. There is no doubt that their bravery saved the man's life, and we proudly present Sergeant Dale Marshall, Officer Aaron Stanley, and Officer Christopher Frazier with the Medal of Bravery. Our Medal of Bravery goes to Officer Marlon Seacrest. On September 29, 2012, a customer was shopping in a store at the Eagledale Shopping Center when an unknown man began speaking to her in an aggressive manner. The woman left the store to get to safety, but he followed her out of the store. As she was attempting to drive away, the man reached into her window and punched her in the head and then started chasing after her car. He then pulled out a handgun and shot at her while she was in her car, striking her at least one time. Officer Seacrest, hearing the shots, responded to the area. With no description of a suspect, he saw a man walking through the parking lot, but not doing anything out of the ordinary. It was then that he observed the same man now arguing with two other men and starting to fight one of them. Officer Seacrest approached, and he ordered all three to the ground. However, the man causing the problem took off running, and a foot chase was on. The man fell down as he was approaching the suspect. Officer Seacrest saw a gun in his hand, and the man was aiming it toward him. Pulling his service weapon, he ordered the man to drop his gun, and after a few brief moments, the man complied. The man then made another quick move to reach for his weapon, and Officer Seacrest again ordered him not to move. The man then said, "Just shoot me. I have nothing to live for anyway." Even after assisting officers had arrived, the man had made one last attempt to flee, but was again apprehended. Officers later found that the suspect's gun had one round in the chamber, and the magazine was empty. Officer Marlon Seacrest chased down an armed suspect who randomly assaulted and fired a shot at one victim and assaulted a second stranger, and who was willing to use his one remaining bullet to harm him. Alone and faced with a volatile situation, he took charge and displayed courage during an incident that could have easily turned deadly for either person. It is our honor today to honor Officer Marlon Seacrest with the Medal of Bravery.
Our next Medal of Bravery goes to Sergeant David Guard, Officer Peter Coe, Officer Robert Robinson, Officer Brian Burnett, and Officer Craig Anderson. On January 1st of this year, 2013, officers responded to a run on Sargent Street where a caller reported seeing several suspects park their car in an alley, exit the vehicle, put on masks, and they reported the suspects were armed with rifles. Officers quickly responded to that area and found the vehicle. The suspects were now somewhere in the area, and several of the officers proceeded on foot throughout the neighborhood. The caller told dispatch that the suspects were last seen near a home on Union Street. At this location, the officers could see several suspects moving around inside the home. Officer Coe and Sergeant Guard went to the front porch of that home. Officers Robinson, Burnett, and Craig were in the rear. Officer Coe saw a male subject look out of the front window and immediately run from the window. Peeking through the window blinds, Officer Coe saw several people laying face down in the living room on the floor, which was in disarray. Officer Robinson then saw a suspect with a skull mask at the back door. The subject made eye contact with Officer Robinson and then ran back into the house. After making entry into the residence, Officer Coe and Sergeant Guard, encountered several armed suspects. The subject then fled into the basement. Officer Coe and Sergeant Guard ran after them. Officers Robinson, Burnett, and Anderson quickly made their way to the basement to confront those gunmen. Apparently, the quick and overwhelming show of force forced those armed suspects, 5 of them in all, to drop their weapons and surrender without incident. Each of these officers, of course, put themselves in harm's way to separate the victims and potential hostages from their assailants, and were prepared to face these 5 armed men and dangerous criminals and stop them right in their tracks. For their unrelenting commitment and dedication to duty, we are pleased to present all of these officers with the Medal of Bravery. Thank you.
Medal of Valor. This is awarded to an IMPD officer who demonstrates courage when confronted by an armed and dangerous adversary. Medal of Valor, Officer Teresa Wellborn. On February 13, 2013, Officer Wellborn responded to a run for assistance from fire and EMS units involving a domestic assault in progress with a suspect who was armed with a knife. Arriving on the scene, she saw fire and EMS personnel waiting outside, and she was able to hear a loud altercation coming from inside of the residence. Personnel on the scene advised her that a man was inside attacking a woman with a knife on the 2nd floor. Without the slightest hesitation, Officer Wellborn immediately entered the residence and ran to the sound of the screams. As she entered the room, she saw a man on top of a woman. He was restraining her on her mattress while punching her. She also saw the man had a large knife, and he had already cut the victim. Realizing the great danger that this armed and violent suspect posed to both the victim and herself, she deployed her taser. The taser immobilized the victim, the suspect, just long enough for Officer Wellborn to gain control of the suspect and get him in custody before he could do further harm to the victim or turn his rage on her. Officer Wellborn showed unquestionable courage in her confrontation with the suspect, who was larger, younger, and armed. Her actions on this day possibly made the difference between life and death for the victim of this attack. Today, we are proud to honor Officer Teresa Wellborn with the Medal of Valor.
Our next medals of valor go to Officer Brian Sosby, Officer Gregory Davis, Officer Michael Deal, Officer Andrew Spalding, and a certificate of appreciation will be awarded to Officer Tim Christie with the Lawrence PD. On June 30th, 2013, the Lawrence Police Department responded to shots fired into a residence. Lawrence officers located the suspect's vehicle and tried to stop it, but the driver wouldn't stop. As officers pursued, the suspect started shooting at them. At that point, IMPD officers rushed to assist, but officers had lost the suspect vehicle. Within a short period of time, officers spotted the suspect's vehicle and the pursuit was back on. And for the second time, the gunmen started firing on officers again. Officers Spalding, Sosby, Davis, and Deal assisted in the pursuit, and other officers blocked other intersections to help safeguard the public. Although Officer Deal's tire was shot out, he still remained in pursuit. When the suspect's tires blew out, he got out of the vehicle and then started firing on pursuing officers. While under fire, officers Sosby, Davis, and Deal and Spalding rushed to assist their fellow officer from the Lawrence PD, engaged the suspect to place him under custody. During this pursuit, these officers were shot at multiple times, yet their commitment to stay in the fight until this reckless and dangerous criminal was in custody was an exceptional display of their bravery and dedication to our community. Officer Brian Sosby, Officer Gregory Davis, Officer Michael Deal, and Officer Andrew Spalding, we are pleased and honored to present you with the Medal of Valor. And in addition, it is our honor to present Officer Tim Christie of the Lawrence Police Department with the Certificate of Appreciation. Thank you so much.
Medal of Valor, Officer Gregory Stevens and Officer Jeffrey Scott. Medal of Bravery, Officer Garland Cooper. Certificate of Commendation, Officer Nathan Schmidt and Officer Michael Wagner Gilbert. On Monday, September 24, 2013, Officer Stevens and Scott responded to a disturbance call on East 21st Street. However, the run was quickly updated to shots fired. On arrival, Officer Stevens saw the suspect, who was armed with a handgun. He ordered the man to drop his weapon, but the man ignored Officer Stevens and fired several shots at him, with one of the shots striking Officer Stevens in the right leg. Although he was shot, Officer Stevens was able to return fire. Officer Scott arrived on the scene, and fearing for Officer Stevens' life, he fires his service rifle at the suspect, striking him several times. Using a tourniquet that Officer Scott gave him, Officer Cooper immediately applied it to Officer Stevens' leg. Officer Wagner Gilbert stayed with Officer Stevens to help keep him calm, all the while not knowing how serious the injury was. As Officer Stevens was transported to the hospital, Officer Schmidt assisted Officer Scott to make sure that he was okay and taken care of during the incident. This was a tremendous effort of teamwork by all of the officers. The suspect in this incident sustained several gunshot wounds, and after receiving treatment for his wounds, was later arrested and charged with attempted murder and being a serious violent felon. For their unrelenting courage to subdue a violent felon that was a danger to our community, for each of their independent actions and their heroic actions as a team, we proudly honor Officer Gregory Stevens and Jeffrey Scott with the Medal of Valor. In addition, we honor Officer Garland Cooper with the Medal of Bravery. And we gladly honor Officers Nathan Schmidt, and Michael Wagner Gilbert with a certificate of accommodation.
The next Medal of Valors go to Officer Gregory Davis and Peter Coe. On August 9th, an attempted armed robbery, which was a carjacking, with shots fired into the vehicle, took place on the 2400 block of Shelby Street. The victim ran, but was able to relay vital information to the officers regarding the suspect's description. Within minutes, Southeast District officers observed the suspect and started to chase him. Unable to apprehend the suspect, a canine was requested to assist in the search. Responding with his service dog, Desco, Officer David, called for a SWAT officer to assist with the search, and Officer Peter Coe and a SWAT operator, who is also working with Southeast District, arrived as tactical backup. Desco started to track and led officers to the suspect, who was hiding in an alley under some brush behind a dumpster in the 2700 block of Napoleon. Officer Davis gave warnings to the suspect to surrender. When the suspect did not comply, Desco was released to apprehend him. Desco engaged the suspect by biting him in the leg. The suspect pulled a handgun and pointed it at the canine officer, then pointed it at his own head, and then at Officer Davis. Officer Davis, fearing for his life, fired his service weapon and fatally wounded that suspect. Both officers and service dog Desco did a superior job while risking their lives to apprehend a violent career criminal. We are pleased and honored to present them with this Medal of Valor. Thank you.
Medal of Valor, Officer Jason Zotz, Officer Jason Ross, Officer Dane Elkins, Officer Daniel Visa, Officer Michael Martin. Certificate of Accommodation, Officer Stephanie Herr, Officer Michael Douglas, Officer William Wogan, Officer Robert McCauley, and Officer Timothy Elliott. On April 2nd, 2013, while working investigations in 46218, a hotspot area, Officer Visa made a vehicle stop for a traffic violation in the area of 36th and Sherman Drive. The vehicle had 5 occupants, and Officers Oates, Ross, and Elkins quickly headed to the location to assist Officer Visa. The driver of the vehicle had a suspended license, and one of the passengers had no identification. They removed the occupants from the vehicle. Officer Visa removed the driver, and Officer Elkins removed the front passenger. Officers Oates and Ross went to the rear passenger side. The backseat passenger closest to the door did not comply with the officer's command to show his hands. Instead, he reached down between his legs towards the floorboard. The other 2 passengers put their hands up. Officers Oates and Ross continued to order the other passengers to show their hands as they drew their service weapons. It was then that Officer Oates reached inside of the car window to grab the passenger's arm to stop the movement and disarm him. As he gained control of the man's arm, he saw that he had a handgun and alerted other officers. As the man attempted to turn the gun toward Officer Oates, Officer Oates released the man's arm and grabbed for the gun. The man fired the gun, and Officer Oates continued to keep the grip on the weapon to try to protect himself. The other passengers in the car and his fellow officers, Officer Oates returned fire. Fearing for Officer Oates' life, Officer Ross also returned fire. When Officer Oates pulled his arm back, Officer Ross saw that he was bleeding heavily and acted as a cover for them both to retreat from the area. During this exchange of gunfire, both officers, Visa and Elkins, refrained from returning fire into the vehicle so not to risk more severe injuries to the other passengers, as well as creating a crossfire with other officers. Officer Elkins started administering first aid to Officer Oates until Officer Herr, who had arrived on the scene and took over, giving first aid to Officer Oates. She kept pressure on his arm and wrist until the medics arrived. It was later discovered that the artery in Officer Oates' left arm was struck, thus causing the severe bleeding. After advising control of the situation, Officer Elkins made sure to alert arriving officers of the shooter's position in the vehicle and direct them away from a crossfire situation. As Officer Ross, Elkins, Visa, and Martin gave cover, Officers Michael Douglas, Timothy Elliott, Robert McCauley, and William Wogan approached the vehicle and escorted the other passengers to safety. 2 of the 4 passengers had suffered gunshot wounds during the gun battle between Officers Oates, Ross, and the gunman. Officer Martin was still attempting to no avail to get the gunman to give up when he made the decision to deploy pepper balls inside the vehicle and force the man out. In the event, he was laying wait for officers. As Officer Martin continued to provide cover, Officer Douglas, Elliott, McCauley, and Wogan made their approach to remove the suspect from the vehicle. However, the officers found that the suspect has suffered a fatal wound during the gun battle and was no longer a threat. For their extreme act and sacrificing their safety during this intense and chaotic incident that resulted in 4 individuals shot, including an officer, we are pleased to honor Officer Jason Oates, Officer Jason Ross, Officer Dane Elkins, Officer Daniel Visa, and Officer Michael Martin with the Medal of Valor. And for their quick actions to protect an injured officer and injured civilians and prevent further injuries to others during this incident, we are pleased to honor Officer Stephanie Herr, Officer Michael Douglas, Officer William Wogan, Officer Robert McCauley, and Officer Timothy Elliott with a certificate of commendation.
I would ask Officer Jason Oates to remain at the front, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Forgive me, it's wrong in our script, so I apologize for that. Our next honor is the Purple Heart, awarded to an IMPD officer who is killed or suffers serious bodily injury while confronting or attempting to apprehend an armed or fleeing individual in the performance of their duties under honorable circumstances. Officer Oates. Officer Oates risked his life, as you just heard, and his personal safety in an attempt to disarm a violent suspect. When his actions proved futile, he trained in kicking in and did what he had to do, and although injured by the gunman, his quick thinking to return fire to stop the threat posed by the gunman was the only alternative that was left before him. It is our honor and our privilege to honor Officer Oates and present him with this Purple Heart. Congratulations. Thank you.
We also have a second Purple Heart, Officer Gregory Stevens. Would you come back down? Now, we read about Officer Gregory Stevens a little bit earlier. He was in the group, you may remember, on Monday, September 24, 2013, that responded to a disturbance call on East 21st Street when shots were fired. Well, today, Officer Stevens displayed a true act of bravery through his selflessness and actions on September 24th with that gunman. And today, it gives us great honor to present him with the Purple Heart as well.
Our final honor this afternoon is the Medal of Honor. The Medal of Honor is the highest award that may be bestowed upon a member of the IMPD. The Medal of Honor will be awarded to an officer who voluntarily distinguishes himself or herself conspicuously by gallantry and extraordinary heroism. The act must be performed at such self-risk as to clearly distinguish the individual from his or her fellow officers. The nature of the incident must verify that the officer was fully aware of the imminent threat to his or her personal safety and that the action performed clearly put their life in jeopardy. The Medal of Honor today goes to Officer Maurice Shipley. As Officer Shipley comes, I'd just like to say, when all of you take the oath to serve our community, you're taking such a high oath. Not only to become a servant, but also to willingly put your life in harm's way, to protect not only the community, but to protect each other. Officer Shipley, we commend you and we thank you for your service. A certificate of commendation will also go to Officer Eric Huxley, Officer Brian Ramey, and Officer Justin Tusing. On September 20th, 2013, Officers Rod Bradway and Maurice Shipley responded to the 6700 block of Eagle Point Drive on the report of a disturbance. Officer Bradway was the first to arrive on scene and went to an upstairs apartment where he could hear a female screaming for help. After banging on the door and receiving no response, and the female still screaming for help, Officer Bradway advised other officers to step it up, and that he was going to kick in the door in the process. Officer Shipley arrived in the parking lot as Officer Bradway forced entry. Officer Shipley then heard multiple gunshots. Officer Shipley rushed toward the gunfire to assist. Upon entering the apartment, Officer Shipley observed the suspect armed with a handgun standing over the lifeless body of Officer Bradway, who had been ambushed. Officer Bradway had returned fire, striking the suspect. The suspect then turned towards Officer Shipley, and a second gun battle ensued, which resulted in Officer Shipley shooting and killing the suspect. Officer Shipley then immediately went to the aid of Officer Bradway in an attempt to assess his injuries and provide medical assistance until the arrival of assisting officers. Officers Eric Huxley, Brian Ramey, and Justin Tusing soon arrived and took turns performing CPR on Officer Bradway until the arrival of medical personnel. Officer Bradway was transported to Wishart Hospital where he was pronounced dead. It was later learned that the suspect had held the female victim and her small child hostage for at least 3 hours prior to the arrival of officers. He had brutally assaulted the female victim in front of her child, and it was believed by investigators that it was his intent to kill both the female and her child and then possibly take his own life. There is no doubt that the actions of Officer Rod Bradway and Officer Maurice Shipley saved the life of that female and her child on that fateful night. Officer Bradway gave his life when he rushed to the aid of a female victim screaming for help and was ambushed and killed by her assailant. Hearing the gunfire, Officer Shipley charged into the apartment and confronted that armed suspect in a second gun battle. The heroic and selfless acts performed by Officer Bradway and Shipley are true examples of their dedication to their profession and to the citizens of Indianapolis. For their life-saving efforts during this incident today, we proudly present Officers Eric Huxley, Brian Ramey, and Justin Tusing, each with a certificate of commendation. On that fateful night, Officer Maurice Shipley selflessly rushed towards gunfire. With extraordinary heroism and dedication to Officer Bradway and the citizens of the city of Indianapolis, it is with extreme honor and the deepest of gratitude that we respectfully present Officer Shipley with the highest of awards, the Medal of Honor. And as we bestow this honor, I'd also like to recognize Officer Bradway's wife, Jamie, who is with us today. Jamie, we want you to know that the community, I know that your police family continues to wrap their arms around you with love and support. We can only imagine the pain and the heartache that you still feel, but we want you to know that the community feels that with you. And we know that your husband paid the ultimate sacrifice. And so many of you and your family sitting here today, we know that that is a reality with the job that you do each and every single day. But we also know that there is a God in heaven that is looking down on all of you, on the Bradway family, and he promises us that though our walk is not easy, he will always be there with us. Though we go through tragedy, though we go through challenges that we do not understand, he promises to work everything out for the good. Out of the tragedy of Officer Bradway's death, we were able to live through and witness a community come together, wrap their arms not around not only his family, but around each other, and to honor the true heroes in our community. Not the people who display a continual reckless disregard for life, for law enforcement, for what is right. I want you officers to please remember that you are such beautiful examples of the true heroes in our community. Yesterday we watched a pop star get on top of an SUV and arrogantly wave to cameras after he was arrested for committing a crime. And unfortunately, for many of our young people, that is a hero. But I want you to remember each and every day when you go out into our communities and you're dealing with some of our young people who are the most troubled, or maybe you're dealing with a family that needs a helping hand, or maybe it's a mother or wife who just needs an I care, or an I love you, or an I understand, that you are our heroes. It is so important for our young people to know that our heroes are not those people out there displaying a reckless disregard, but our heroes are those of you who stand up each and every day to protect us, to keep us safe. And hopefully it's the parents in the homes that can become the role models and the heroes for their families. But if a child doesn't have a parent, they have you. When you come in and you risk your life to protect all of us. So we want to say that we appreciate you. We thank you. We understand the sacrifice that you are making for us. And each and every day, hopefully, everyone in our community is praying for you and your safety. It is my personal prayer that God continues to put his loving arms of protection around you, that he continues to give you the wisdom that you need when you look in the face of danger, because we know that it is a war out there, and you are on the side of good. And we know that in the end, good is always going to triumph over evil. So we thank you, we honor you, we respect you, and it's our deepest gratitude that we again pay the utmost respect to you today with giving you these honors. Jamie, once again, thank you for being here. Thank you for your ultimate show of grace and elegance through what we know is such a heartbreaking time. But just know that in this loss, so many people have been touched. And Officer Bradway's story and his example will continue to live on through you and his children and in this department and, of course, in this entire community. We thank you and we love you, and we will continue to wrap our arms around you. Once again, congratulations to all of you that have received medals for your honor and your bravery today. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts as well. I'll now turn it back over to
Again, all of us here this afternoon were deeply moved by today's ceremony. We would like to again thank you, Fanchen from Fox 59, as well as Julie and Grace from Wish TV. Please join me in thanking them this afternoon. Thank you. Thank you. We would also like to express our gratitude to Miss Emily Cords and her wonderful staff here at the Indianapolis Marion County Public Library, as well as the library board, for not only letting us use this fantastic venue but for allowing us to use the vast resources and, of course, their financial support. We'd like to thank Ms. Cynthia Hartshorn and the Arsenal Tech Show Choir for lending us their talents. And a special thanks to Ms. Gary Legato and Bright Shield Medal, who is sponsoring the reception afterwards. I know many of us like to scoot out, but they've done so much hard work to provide refreshments, so please stay around and enjoy one another's company here for a bit. And finally, we'd like to thank Ms. Donna Forbes, who's worked so tirelessly. I know she doesn't like to give accolades, but we want to thank her, as well as the IMPD Media Relations Office staff, for spending countless hours organizing and planning this event for our brave heroes, so they won't be unnoticed.